Japan is the only country against which nuclear weapons have been used. This was due to the unwillingness to lay down arms and preparations for the continuation of the war. One of the other reasons was the United States' desire to take revenge for Pearl Harbor, and the unstable position of the new President Truman, who wanted to strengthen his place in the US and the world. So on August 6, 1945 at 1:27, the B-29 carrying the Little Boy takes off. At 6:30, Captain William Parsons and his team put the Little Boy in combat readiness. On August 6th at 7:09, an air alert is set in Hiroshima. Radar sightings indicated another B-29, reporting weather and visibility. On 6 August at 8:10, 3 B-29 bombers were spotted by radars. In Hiroshima, the air alert was raised again. On August 6th at 8:15, a 4.1-ton Little Boy nuclear bomb was dropped from the B-29 aircraft. It exploded within 500 meters of the ground after 43 seconds of being dropped, creating an 800-kilometer-an-hour wind blast, which destroyed the city. However, despite the incredible destruction, the Japanese Empire did not intend to surrender. The leadership did not admit that the bomb was nuclear and attributed all destruction to cataclysm. So after 3 days of refusing to comment and absence of the desire for surrender, the US decides to drop its second bomb on the Japanese Empire. On 9 August 1945, an American B-29 bomber under the command of Major Charles Sweeney took off from Tinian Island at 2:47. He was carrying a plutonium Fat Boy bomb on board. At 9:20, he arrived in Kokura, which was the primary target. However, due to the worsening weather, the pilot flew to a secondary target, Nagasaki. At 11:02 p.m. on August 9th, 4.5 tons Fat Boy falls on Nagasaki. Within 600 meters of the target, it causes almost the same damage as in Hiroshima. However, the Nagasaki landscape also contributed. On 15 August, the Japanese Empire, represented by Emperor Hirohito and Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, decided to surrender, which was publicly announced on 15 August 1945. On September 2, 1945, the Japanese Empire signed the Act of Surrender, ending World War II. The US wins a truly lightning-fast victory and becomes the first country to possess nuclear weapons. And in 1952, it tests the first prototype of a thermonuclear bomb. The nuclear arms race has begun. The closest rival of the US in the nuclear club, the USSR, realizing that behind the energy of the atom there is the future, at any cost also wanted to get a nuclear capability. Industrial espionage in the Reich and the United States, involvement of the engineers and physicists from around the world, allowed the Soviet Union, under the command of Lavrenti Beria, to test his first RDS-1 nuclear bomb, which was a copy of Fat Man in 1952, thus achieving nuclear parity. Nuclear weapons were far from ideal, but new fears and anxieties had already emerged in the hearts of the inhabitants of our planet. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union aggressively increased their nuclear capabilities, after which the Soviet Union tested the most giant thermonuclear bomb in history, the Tsar bomb. The blast was between 56 and 60 megatons. One of the hottest and most famous events that almost led the world to a nuclear catastrophe was the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The United States placed nuclear warheads in Turkey, and the Soviet Union did it in Cuba in response. Fortunately, former leaders Kennedy and Khrushchev were able to come to terms and prevent the world from collapsing. Tensions between the two countries continued until the collapse of the Soviet Union. One of the best-known cases occurred on 23 September 1983, when the Soviet nuclear early warning radar system erroneously reported the launch of US missiles, which almost led to nuclear war. With the disintegration of the USSR, Its nuclear potential was inherited by the Russian Federation, and the degree of tension and nuclear apocalypse seemed to be dropping. However, on February 24, 2022, the situation began to change again. Today, more than 90% of the world's nuclear weapons are in the hands of the US and the successor of the USSR, Russia. But it is necessary to mention other participants in the nuclear club. It has 9 member states: the United States, Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and, unofficially, Israel. The United Kingdom was supposed to receive development from the United States, but in the 1950s there was an escalation between the Allies, so the British were forced to develop their own arsenal. This was helped by scientists partially admitted to the development of the Project Manhattan, as a result of which the little boy and the fat man appeared. The first tests of the British, led by Prime Minister W. Churchill, took place on Montebello Island on 3 October 1952. That same year, Churchill publicly announced Britain's nuclear status. France began its exploration of the atom as early as 1937 to address the issue of energy shortages, including military purposes. In October 1945, the country began to think about resuming its nuclear program, as it was once again facing a power shortage after liberation. 15 years later, France tests its first 70-kiloton nuclear bomb in Algeria. China gained its potential with the help of its older brother, the USSR. Although China's relations with the USSR have also escalated, on October 16, 1964, China tested its first nuclear bomb. Moreover, the date became China's official declaration of non-use of nuclear weapons as the first. China maintains this statement to this day. In August 1947, India and Pakistan gained independence from Britain. However, the Indo-Pakistani War began in October. The conflict ended after 2 years with the division of the princely state of Kashmir and Jammu, which were in northern India. Subsequent confrontations for this territory occurred in 1964 and 1971. But in 1974, India was the first who tested its nuclear weapons. In response to the Indian tests, Pakistan began its own and reaches nuclear parity with India in 1998. The next open confrontation, called the Kargil conflict, occurred between May and July 1999. The result was a victory for India and the return of land. North Korea received information on nuclear technology from its allies, the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, but initially it was a peaceful atom. The development of the atomic bomb began in the 70s of the last century. In the 1990s, the DPRK acquired uranium enrichment facilities in Pakistan. The US, led by Bill Clinton, invited the DPRK to negotiate a nuclear freeze. Despite President Clinton's efforts, President Bush's rise to power in 2001 exacerbated relations between the DPRK and the US. As a result, in 2002, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea announced that it would return to developing a nuclear bomb, and in 2004 it refused further negotiations, accusing South Korea of accumulating uranium. In 2005, the DPRK declared that it had nuclear weapons. Israel had never acknowledged the existence of weapons on its territory because of its policies, but there was every reason to believe that Israel possessed both nuclear weapons and their delivery methods. For various reasons, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Belarus, South Africa, Libya, Brazil, and Argentina have renounced nuclear weapons. Of course, the growing number of nuclear weapons in the world had to be controlled. Early opinions about the need for atomic control for military purposes came from physicists Niels Bohr and Leo Szilard in 1944 and in 1945 respectively, but they were not heard. Only in 1957 was the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, established with headquarters in Vienna. The purpose of the organization is the peaceful use of the atom. In 1968, the IAEA created the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, which was immediately signed by the USSR, the United States, the United Kingdom, and 40 other states. China and France acceded to the treaty in 1992. The United States, China, France, the United Kingdom, and the successor to the Soviet Union are the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. The DPRK, led by Kim Il-sung, joined the IAEA in 1974 and signed the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons in December 1985. However, as a result of the political scandal over the non-admission of IAEA personnel to a number of DPRK nuclear facilities under the leadership of Kim Il-sung's son, Kim Jong-il, in June 1994, the DPRK completely withdrew from the organization. In 1996, IAEA organizes a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty, which has not been signed by North Korea, India, and Pakistan. In general, today we have the following statistics of nuclear weapons in the world. There are more than 5,400 warheads in the United States, 1,600 of which are active and ready for use. It was the US that cumulatively conducted a record number of nuclear weapon tests, 1,054. It is the only country that is now reducing its nuclear stockpile. In the Russian Federation, there are about 6,000 warheads, of which 1,600 are active. This is one of the two countries that threatens the world with the use of nuclear weapons. Britain's nuclear capability consists of 4 nuclear submarines and 220 warheads. France has 290 nuclear warheads, and China has 350. Pakistan and India have almost symmetrical warheads, 165 in Pakistan versus 160 in India. The DPRK is the second nuclear country in the world that continues its aggressive policy and actively develops and tests various types of bombs. There are officially 20 nuclear warheads in service. According to experts, Israel may have 80 nuclear warheads in service. Of course, there can be no absolutely accurate statistics on the number of nuclear arsenals. Because of each country's internal security, it cannot be excluded that one or more countries' arsenals may be significantly larger. In general, nuclear weapons should guarantee peace and security in the world. The basic idea is specifically to deter the enemy from attack. Although recalling history a little over 100 years ago, the guarantor of peace was a conventional machine gun, from which the losses were so enormous that no country would dare to start a new war. These thoughts led to World War I. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, has stated that the world's nuclear arsenals will grow in the coming decades. Russia is constantly pursuing an aggressive policy. North Korea is threatening South Korea. Pakistan has territorial claims on India, and Israel has been at war with Palestine for decades. Over the past year, international tensions have increased significantly, and the world has once again approached the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is what will happen if one country stops using nuclear weapons to maintain the balance of power and peace in the world, and uses them for their intended purposes. To begin with, the use of nuclear weapons by one country immediately frees the hands of other owners. So far, fortunately, there has been only one use of nuclear weapons in history, with 2 strikes against Japan. More than 50,000 homes and structures were destroyed, with an estimated 130,000 to 160,000 dead. How many have died from cancer and radiation burns is hard to imagine. Today's nuclear weapons have evolved significantly. For example, the mentioned 1,600 Russian nuclear warheads have a capacity of 10 to 100 kilotons each. And the US nuclear submarines like Ohio carry on board a warhead whose powers are 30 to 40 times bigger than the bombs that fell on Japan in 1945. Different experts have their own points of view, but all agree on one thing. In the hypothetical case of a full-scale nuclear war, there will be no winners. In addition to the millions of victims who will die at once, there will be tens, probably hundreds of millions of radiation patients. The economic hell for the survivors will begin. Our planet will experience unprecedented destruction and will gain an ecological catastrophe of unprecedented proportions, turning the Earth into hell. A partial view can be drawn from the experience of the Chernobyl disaster of 26 April 1986. The explosion of the reactor emitted 100 times more radioactive elements into the atmosphere than the two bombs that fell on Japan, Little Boy and Fat Man. There is still a 30-kilometer exclusion zone in this territory, and the total nuclear arsenal in the world equals thousands of Chernobyl. Moreover, in a world where economies are closely linked to export-import relations, most countries will immediately have commodity deficits. Hunger will break out in the non-agrarian countries. Hundreds of years of economic system might collapse. Banking systems may be destroyed. There will be an incredible rise in crime. Survivors will return to centuries ago. Therefore, Hiroshima and Nagasaki must remain in history as the only warning that nuclear energy should serve only the benefit of our civilization.